Join us as we dive into the history, hauntings, and high strangeness of the world to try to better understand the paranormal. I will be your guide. I am paranormal researcher and investigator Eric Freeman Sims. Welcome to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Hey everybody, this is the return of the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. I am your host as usual, Eric Freeman Sims. Thank you for all the well wishes when I was having some health issues. All is well now, but I'm so glad to be back. And thank y'all for sticking in there with me. And thank y'all so much for listening. You are amazing. Today we have an awesome guest for you. His name is Maxim Furek. Maxim has a degree in psychology, and he was a rock music journalist for many years. And then the paranormal found him when he was writing a previous book about the Shepton Mine disaster. And he decided to put out a new book through Beyond the Fray Publishing called Coal Region Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit. So that's what we're going to be talking about with him today. And we'll get on to our guest here in just a minute. I just want to make a few announcements. We have gone back with our original opening and closing in honor of my awesome friend Chris Lips, who sadly passed away a while back. And I got permission from his children to carry on his legacy and his music. So you will be hearing our original theme song in the beginning and the end of the show from now on forever, hopefully. Keeping his music alive, his memory alive. He was an amazing songwriter, amazing musician, and I'm just honored that they let me still use his music. They could have said no, but they said yes, and they're awesome for that. I thank them so much for that. Also, our tickets for the Tennessee Haunts and Legends Expo will be going on sale July 31st. They are $10 a ticket. 12 and under are free. And that is for Tennessee Haunts and Legends Expo on October 21st, 2023 at the Fairgrounds in Nashville, Tennessee. And like I said, tickets are $10, 12 and under is free. It's $10 for parking. We have no control over that. That's all the fairgrounds. We get no money from that whatsoever. All the proceeds from the expo are going to two different charities. We're going to split them between Trousdale Place, which is an awesome historic haunted location in Gallatin, Tennessee, and then also an amazing organization called ARC, or Animal Rescue Corps. You may have seen them on TV. They help bust up puppy mills, and they help get the animals to no-kill shelters to be adopted. And they're amazing. I have a couple of dogs that came from puppy mills that ARC busted up, and they just do amazing things. So come out and help support two great causes. And we are trying to put together the biggest paranormal event of 2023 in Middle Tennessee with the Tennessee Haunts and Legends Expo. We've got some amazing vendors, and we got a full day of awesome speakers as well. You can go check out tnhauntsandlegendsexpo.com for all the details. And like I said, tickets are on sale July 31st. And if you would like to be a vendor, we still have some spots available. Shoot us an email at tnhauntsandlegends@gmail.com. I guess that's all the housekeeping for today, so we will get on with the show. Enjoy. All right, today we have Maxim Furek. Hey, Max, welcome to the show. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. I'm looking forward to this, and I really appreciate the fact that you were inviting me to your podcast. So thanks so much for that.
Yeah, thanks for coming on. I do a lot of stuff with the Beyond the Fray authors, and I have for a long time. Got a good working relationship with Shannon LeGros, and I was excited to have you on. You kind of have a little bit different take on the paranormal, and also you have, some stories that haven't been out there before. So I'm always looking for that, the new stuff. We can sit here and talk about, ghosts all day with about 1,000 different people, but I always like to find new people with different takes.
Yeah, thank you. And I do want to say this, my book, Coal Region Hoodoo, was just launched something like 3 months ago, published by Beyond the Fray, but I can't tell you what an exciting trip it's been so far. I mean, the book has been well received. It's trending. We're getting a lot of good feedback. It's doing well on Amazon, and it's amazing. So I have to say one thing though, just to kick this thing off. The paranormal community is close knit. They're tight, and they're well connected. So it's just amazing that somebody like me, who's sort of an unknown, in the paranormal community, just amazing that I've been accepted and embraced and almost, and by some people celebrated. So, Coal Region Hoodoo is just having a tremendous, welcoming party, and it's a great launch. So I can't say enough about, people like you and what you're doing to, support people like me. So, yeah, thanks so much for that.
Ah, you're very welcome. Thank you for coming on. And I really enjoyed the book. I like how you started off with kind of tying pop culture and the paranormal kind of together, and how it's just kind of ingrained through movies and music and all of that. That, that's why we're so into the paranormal, and our movies reflect that, and, the questions of life after death and things like that. So I just loved how you wrote the book and then got into the Shepton mine disaster, and then some of the other stories that you have in there, and kind of how you intertwine all of these things. And at first you think, reading the book, you're like, well, how does this fit into the paranormal? And then you kind of weave it perfectly in there and explain, how these things have to do with each other.
Yeah, and thank you for that observation. A couple of things with Coleridge and Hoodoo. I have over 400 references to books, magazines, and personal interviews. So I'm really proud of the fact that I was able to go and sort of vet this, sort of validate it. The
Yeah.
other thing too is that I have a couple of chapters on UFOs, but what you just said about the book, in ufology, we take a look at the say the contactees, the abductees, the hoaxers, the scientists, the popular culture, and you spin it all around, space exploration, spin it all around into this wonderful fabric of ufology. And, that's an example of, I think, what Coleridge and Hoodoo is. I mean, it's not just one thing. It's not black or white, but there's shades of gray, and there's a lot of markers, there's a lot of identifiers. And with Coleridge and Hoodoo, this is Pennsylvania centric. Now, it's not just Pennsylvania, because when we talk about UFOs and Bigfoot, that's worldwide. But Pennsylvania is notorious for UFO and Bigfoot sightings, as well as Bigfoot and UFO sightings together. So when I wrote the book, I incorporated, not only the scientific and the paranormal, but also the popular culture, which has embraced the paranormal. And with Pennsylvania, we're talking specifically about classic films, sci-fi and horror films like Night of the Living Dead, The Blob, and The Philadelphia Experiment. Again, all Pennsylvania-centric sci-fi and horror films that have really been classics. And with I start Coleridge and Hoodoo off with a chapter called Night of the Living Dead. And we went out to Evans City, that's in Butler County, Pennsylvania, that's just north of Pittsburgh. And the mayor of Evans City, Dean Zinkon, gave my wife and I a tour of where they shot Night of the Living Dead. But in my book, what I say, Eric, is that Night of the Living Dead isn't so much a movie about zombies. We see the zombies and all this, and this has, created The Walking Dead and so many other spinoffs. But I contend that Night of the Living Dead is more of a sociological take at what was happening in 1968. And I tell people that if you think things are crazy in 2020, 2021, 22, and 23, with the political divide, with COVID, with all the other things that are happening, just take a look at what happened in 1968 when Night of the Living Dead was launched. And you had North Korea taking over our Pueblo. They captured American warship. You had the Tet Offensive, where every province in South Vietnam was overrun by the VC. You had the assassinations of Robert Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. And then you had the Easter City riots, where over 100 American cities were torched, pretty much because a lot of African Americans were just totally horrified and disgusted and hopeless after their leader, Martin Luther King Jr., was killed. So that, plus the Chicago demonstration, the Chicago riots, hitting protesters against the National Guard. 1968 was hell. It was Armageddon. But yet, the important thing is this: the Republic stood firm, and we endured that, and we became stronger. But 1968 was a hell of a ride, and it was a nasty year. And I'm glad that we're past that, because that was a wicked one. But again, Night of the Living Dead, according to Maxim Furek, Night of the Living Dead was more about a sociological commentary than about zombies. So, I don't know what anybody else has to say about that, but that's how I kick off my book. I talk about that. And then, as you said, I get into some other things that, maybe the reader's going to question, what's that have to do with paranormal? But I talk about Jack the Ripper and ripperology, and I talk about fear. What creates fear? Why does the moth go to the flame? Why do we watch horror films and all of this? So, all of this is part of that, I mean, that, we like to go over to the dark side. So, Jung talked about that, Carl Jung, the psychoanalyst. So I have Jung and Freud in there, and a lot of other folks. But thank you for pointing that out. I think, I think on in that respect, Coleridge and Hoodoo is different from other paranormal books.
Yeah, and I love the psychology take on it, and you started your career out. Well, you started out as a psychologist. You have a degree in psychology, and also as a rock journalist, a rock music journalist.
Yeah.
And so that really comes through in the book too. But yeah, I love that unique take that you've kind of taken all of your experience with psychology and with doing the rock journalism and kind of put it into this book, and it all comes out in a great way.
Yeah, well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. A lot of times us authors don't get a whole lot of feedback. So to be able to get some feedback from my book is just wonderful. And then also the other thing, a lot of us authors don't have a vehicle or a forum to tell the world, like, hey, well, listen, look at me. I got a book here. It's worth taking a look at. It's called Coleridge and Hoodoo. So the fact that you're offering me this spot, this forum, is just, I mean, awesome. And again, I'm most appreciative and filled with gratitude. So thank you so much for that.
Yeah, you're very welcome. I love doing this, and I've been doing it for a few years now and been successful at it. So I love having guests like you, like I said, that are different. Not that I don't like all of my guests. I enjoy talking to everybody, but yeah, something just different, a different take. So let's start back at the beginning. Like I had mentioned, you were a psychologist and a rock music journalist. So how did you translate and get into the paranormal side of things?
Yeah, I get asked that a lot. And what happened was, I mean, this is pretty interesting, but I sort of stumbled into the paranormal. I mean, it found me. I didn't go looking for it, but it sort of found me. And what I was doing was this. There was a song in 1971 called Timothy. And Timothy was about cannibalism in a mine shaft. The thing that Timothy resonated with me was because Timothy was the highest charting song that we ever had from a rock group in northeastern Pennsylvania. Now, the lead singer, Bill Kelly, he was with the Boys. Bill is currently down in Nashville, and he's doing a Christian thing. Bill Kelly had this wonderful soaring voice. He was the lead vocalist on Timothy. I was working on a rock mythology. I was connecting the song Timothy about cannibalism with the 1963 Shepton mining disaster. And in 1963, the true story, 3 miners were trapped over 330 feet below the ground. They were there for 2 weeks. It was international news. I mean, it was one of the top stories of the year for Associated Press. But after they rescued the 2 miners, the townspeople from Shepton wanted to know what happened to the 3rd miner. Where was he? And there were allegations. They were horrible. They were unsubstantiated, but there were allegations of cannibalism. So many people felt that, one, that Louis Bova, the missing miner, was cannibalized by his mates. The other thing, that from 63 to 71, a lot of people felt that the song Timothy was directly about what happened in Shepton. So whatever those people in Shepton went through in 1963 with the, horrible rumors and allegations of cannibalism, that was revisited back in 71 when they kept on hearing the song, the most popular song ever in northeastern Pennsylvania, being played on regular rotation. So with me, I was just looking at Shepton and writing this rock mythology. And as I was investigating Shepton, I found themes of the paranormal, specifically examples of out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, and life-after-death experiences. And that's just the beginning. So Shepton, the disaster of 1963, was one of the most bizarre mining disasters, one of the most paranormal mining disasters of all time. And what I did was I wrote a book about it, and that book was called Shepton, the Myth, Miracle, and Music. And that sort of launched my career, I guess, as a paranormal researcher.
Yeah, and I like how you said that the paranormal found you. I think talking to many different people, I think that's how it works for most of us, is that we don't necessarily go out and seek out the paranormal. Something happens to kind of throw us into it and get us deeper into that world. But also the Shepton mine story, I think, is one of the greatest stories that, for whatever reason, has not been big in the paranormal world. And I don't know why. I've heard of it before. There was another mine disaster in Kentucky, I believe, that had some similar undertones to it, to what the miners were saying when they were trapped in the ground. But I had heard of it, but not in the general paranormal world. And it's interesting that it's not been like I said, a bigger story because of the things that these miners claimed happened. And then one of them just disappeared.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And traces were never found of him. The other thing too, that just baffles me more than anything else, Shepton, I wanted to call my book the Shepton Convergence. There was a convergence of themes, maybe a vortex, maybe a porthole. I don't know. But I mean, all these things seem to happen in Shepton at the same time, at the same place. One of the things was the rescue technology. And they developed this in Shepton in 63, but this was, they would use these cages. They would sink a cage down the mine shaft. The miner would get in there and they would close the door and they would pull him up and save him and then do it again. In Chile, the 2010 Chilean copper mine disaster, they used this Shepton rescue technology to save those 33 miners. Now, there's been books written about the Chilean copper mine disaster. There was a movie called The 33. But in everything that I've researched, I have yet to find anybody say that thanks to the Shepton rescue team, the people in Chile were saved. If you go to Shepton, Pennsylvania, there's a sign there that was put up by the Pennsylvania, I believe, Historical Commission, whatever the name of that bureaucracy is. And it cites the fact that Shepton technology of 1963 saved those people in 2010. So, I mean, it's a fact, it's true, it happened, but yet, here's something else. I mean, it's not so much paranormal, but it's something that happened. One other thing, too, just a little parallel between Shepton in 1963 and the Chilean copper mine disaster in 2010. 33 guys were trapped down there. They only had a little bit to survive on. They had a cracker and a tablespoon of tuna fish and a little thimble of milk. So that was the ration for the whole day. This was going to keep these people going. They realized that at a certain point they were going to run out of food. And there's been several books written about this Chilean copper mine disaster. The books talk about that if they may reach a point where they might have to resort to cannibalism in order to exist, or in order to survive. Now, here, this was interesting. This is where some of the gallows humor comes in. All of the guys down there, the 33, were from Chile, except for one guy, and that dude was from Ecuador. So in the books, they said if anybody was going to get it, it was going to be the guy from Ecuador. So he would be he would be cannibalized. So this was written about in several books, and so the aspect of cannibalism in mining disasters is not unique. I mean, we've seen it a whole lot. One thing that did happen in Shepton, and this was kind of telling, the Chicago Daily News had an article, and they said that according to mining lore, the shortest guy would be the one to get cannibalized. And in the case of Shepton, there were three guys. The shortest guy was Louis Bova. He was like 5'4", and he was the one that disappeared. So when that story was in the Chicago Daily News, Davy Fallon, one of the guys that was rescued, said that only evil men would pose such a question. Only evil men would even propose that we had cannibalized our brother. And he was really upset about that and denied it, said it never happened, it wasn't true. But yet it was amazing how the rumors persisted. And even though Felon and Throne, the rescued miners, were celebrated as heroes, there were always those people, those insinuations, those rumors, those wicked rumors that maybe they had done something, sinful, with their mate, that they had cannibalized them. So, to this day, those rumors, are still out there.
So what did the two surviving miners, what did they say happened to the one that disappeared?
Well, what they said was this, and I sort of believe this, and again, whenever I do my presentations, people always come up to me and they have their theories of what happened to the missing miner. I mean, I've had so many theories, but here's what happened. It was on a Tuesday in August, and they sent the buggy down, and Throne and Felon and Bova filled the buggy up with coal. So they signaled George Walker, he was the tipper, the foreman, to bring it up. So he brought it up, he tipped it, and started to send the buggy back down so they could refill it. That's when the mine started to collapse, and it was just like one cave in after another. And I believe that Louis Bova, the missing miner, was separated from Felon and Throne by millions and millions of tons of rock and coal and timber and all kinds of other debris that I don't believe that they were even close to him. Now, they claimed that they spoke with him, through this mountain of debris. And they said, and Louis Bova claimed that his leg was broken. So they talked to him, they told him to hang in there. And then little by little, his voice faded and they didn't hear from him again. But so according to the rescued miners, that was the story. They believed that he was trapped on the other side and that his leg was broken. And that was the last they heard of him. There were never any. They went down there after the two miners were rescued. They went down there to check out the pit where they were, and there were no bones, no bloody clothes, no indication that anything horrific had happened. So we really don't know. We have the testimony of the miners who claim that they never did anything like that.
Yeah, and you think that if they would have cannibalized him, you find something, they're not going to eat all the bones, and they would have found some evidence of him, not his clothes or something.
Exactly. Yeah. So, and again, the spaces where they were tight. Some of them were so small that you had to crawl on your hands and knees. Other parts of this chamber that might have been as big as a football field. Part of it they could walk upright, but it kept on changing. The terrain kept on changing because of what they called the rushes, and these were the cave-ins. They call them rushes. Every now and then there would be another rush, and then they would have to go and steel themselves and just get ready for more stuff falling. And it had to be a horrific existence.
Yeah.
For the miners to be crawling on their hands and knees, bloodied, sucking in coal dust and dirt, and in total darkness, and having no hope of being extricated. And that had to be the worst part of it. Having no hope at all. So
yeah,
it was just a horrific ordeal.
And they're in pitch black. They have no light, no nothing.
Yep.
So they made some pretty extraordinary claims about things that happened to them when they were down there, and that's what takes us kind of into the supernatural, paranormal aspect of this.
Yeah, and what I did in Coleridge and Hoodoo, my first book was Shepton. I called it the Shepton mythology. It's Shepton, the myth, miracle, and music. But after writing that, I realized that there was a demographic that was hungering for more information. So what I did was, with Coleridge and Hoodoo, I addressed Shepton again, but I went deeper and further, and I expanded on that narrative. And Shepton, of course, from the coal region, is one of the most infamous, one of the most notorious examples of the paranormal that we have. But even, you say that a lot of people haven't heard about Shepton. A lot of the people around here in northeastern Pennsylvania are not familiar with the paranormal aspects of Shepton. It's just amazing how something which has so much notoriety could also be so obscure. So I don't know. I'm doing everything I can to make it more visible, but
yeah.
But I don't. It's not like Roswell, where everybody knows about Roswell, or Kenneth Arnold, his Mount Rainier sighting. Everybody knows about that, but Shepton just seems to be like the orphan, the poor orphan.
Yeah, and they had some pretty extraordinary claims about seeing one of the popes who had recently died, and these doors opening and these beings coming out.
Yeah, I think the vision of Pope John the 23rd has to be viewed as something that is very profound. And I say this because Pope John the 23rd died in June of 1963, and Shepton took place in August of 63. So when he manifested himself, when he appeared in the mine for those 2 weeks, he had already died physically. All three of his purported miracles happened after he had died. And the way this works, the way miracles work, and I don't know how it is, with Roman Catholics, They talk about if a person has demonstrated a life of faith and piety, of good works, somebody that you could say is actually holy, for a human being, somebody that's holy, then maybe that person might be selected by God for a miracle. So the three miracles that Pope John the 23rd allegedly performed were performed not so much by him, but through him, by God. So it was a spiritual thing, a very deeply personal thing. Pope John the 23rd was canonized in 2014, and Vatican scholars talked about Shepton being one of his miracles. And I've spoken to numerous Catholic priests and nuns. The one nun that I talked to, I said, sister, did you know that all three of the miracles that were performed by Pope John the 23rd happened after he died? And she said, well, of course. And I said, well, what do you mean, well, of course? And she says, well, he died and went to heaven, and that's where he got his power, his authority. And he came down to earth and he worked those miracles. So I don't know. I mean, call it a miracle, or call it a guardian angel. Maybe he was a guardian angel or a spirit guide or an apparition. Doesn't matter what name you want to give it. The fact that they saw Pope John the 23rd was a reason to give them hope that they were going to be rescued. So that's how it works. So it was, it doesn't matter what we call it. In the book, I call it a miracle, and a lot of other people believe that it was a miracle. But whatever it was something good and positive, and it was something that helped Felon Enthroned endure those horrific 2 weeks underground. So
yeah. And what about the beings that they saw? There's like a door that opened, and they saw some beings in this weird stairway, and
a bunch of things. Again, this is in pure darkness. They saw humanoid creatures, three of them, and they were carrying a plaque. They looked like they were built like football players. They looked like a cross between Roman warriors and Egyptians. So they had the hair, dark black hair, jet black hair, and headbands, sandals, bronze skin, huge skin, all that. And again, they weren't threatening, but they seemed to be apparitions, maybe spirit guides, again, like Pope John the 23rd, just sent there to give them the message that they were going to be saved, that they were going to be rescued. So they saw that. The other thing, too, I never had a chance to interview Felon Enthroned because they had died, before I was working on my book, before I had it published. But I was able to track down this business person who worked with Davy Felon. Now, this business guy was very successful. He's still around, and he's very well known. And he allowed me to interview him, but only under the condition of anonymity. So he would ask Davy Felon, well, what about this cannibalism? What about the Pope? What about the golden stairwells? And Davy Felon said, yes, those things are true. I mean, I did see that stuff. No, I never cannibalized Louis Bova, but he did see these stairwells that were going ostensibly to heaven, and they were seated with his relatives and his ancestors, and there were people that he recognized, and then even people that he didn't know, he sort of recognized as being, family or ancestors. So it was just amazing. It was almost like an example of a near-death experience, rather than going through that tunnel of light. It was something else. It was like all these people sitting, seated respectfully on these golden stairs. So they saw things and they talked about it. And then at the end, Davy Felon, who was very forthcoming with talking about what he saw down there, he said, there's some things that I saw that I will never talk about. And he took that to his grave. And to this day, we wonder what Davy Felon was actually talking about. But so that was probably the biggest mystery of all.
Yeah, and one of the things I find interesting too is they kind of corroborate each other's stories. And so it's not like one of them is, far out in left field away from what the other one is saying either.
Yeah. So what happened was there was a guy named Ed Conrad, and Ed Conrad was this really interesting dude. He was a newspaper man from Shenandoah, Pennsylvania. They call it Shendo. So he was from Shendo. But anyway, he befriended Davy Felon. And what he did was this. Now, this is interesting because he was able to go and take this paranormal story, which was just a story, narrative, and he was able to bring it a little bit closer to the scientific. So he had Davy Fallon tape recorded, he had him polygraphed, he had all the stuff notarized. He took Davy Fallon down to the University of Virginia, where Fallon met Dr. Bruce Grayson. And Dr. Bruce Grayson, you could Google him, he's written all these books about near-death experiences. And Dr. Bruce Grayson talked about Shepton being an example of near-death experiences. Ed Conrad took them down to Bridgewater, Virginia, to meet Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. And your listeners probably know of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross because she was one of the 20th century's foremost abstract and leading thinkers. She was a progressive thinker, and she wrote a book called On Death and Dying, where when we lose a loved one, we're angry at God, we negotiate with God, we say, if you bring them back, I'll be good, I'll change my ways. And then finally, after all these twists and turns, some of us finally find acceptance, and we accept the fact that our departed loved one has died. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross believed that what happened in Shepton was an example of life after death. She was specifically talking about Pope John the 23rd. Again, he died in June of 63. Shepton took place in August. So the miracle of Pope John the 23rd took place after he had died.
Yeah, that whole story is pretty crazy and interesting.
Yeah. And again, also crazy, interesting, but also validated by scientific minds. And as you said, their stories telling the same thing. They would interview these guys. Ed Conrad had them interviewed and polygraphed at the same time separately, and they both told similar stories, of what they saw down there. So, whatever it was, whatever they saw, it was profound. And again, I know the naysayers may say, well, it was hallucinations, it was caused by sensory deprivation, it was this and that. I don't believe that. I believe that what they experienced was profound. And when I wrote my book, Shepton, The Myth, Miracle, and Music, I followed the words of Fallon and Throne. They described the narrative, and that's the story that I told. And again, look at the parallels between, say, what the Shepton miners experienced and maybe what the Skeptical Inquirer said when they wrote about it. I mean, they had a long-winded article about that, about my book and my research. But the skeptics of Shepton are pretty much like the skeptics of UFOs. I mean, ordinary people see these objects, these anomalies, and a lot of times in the early 40s and 50s and 60s, the government, the Pentagon, would say that these people were hallucinating, or they were mentally ill. They were seeing swamp gas. They were seeing reflections from Venus.
Right.
They were needy and all. So they had a litany of excuses. Again, not really not having any respect for these people that were coming forward. And one thing that we know in ufology, J. Allen Hynek, who participated in the government's Project Sign, Project Grunge, and Project Blue Book, Allen Hynek said, wait a second, the scientific community is being very disrespectful to common people who are coming forward and saying, look, I saw something. And so rather than at least looking at it and accepting this as a possibility, a lot of times these people were criticized and they were castigated. And that's why a lot of people never came forward to tell the media or tell their friends what they had seen because they were afraid of ridicule. So,
right.
That happens today. But Shepton is sort of a microcosm of what's happening today in the world of ufology.
Yeah, and my thing, one of my biggest things is, what would they have to gain out of that? I don't think these two miners that got trapped and went through this horrific thing would want all the media attention and press, and I mean, it's not like they got rich off of telling this incredible story about what they saw and what they experienced.
Yeah, no, what they got was, I believe the Associated Press had exclusive rights for 1 year. So they interviewed them countless times for that 1 year period in 1963. So the story was one of human survival. We made it through those 2 weeks. There was we prayed, we dug, It was 54 degrees down there, a constant 52 degrees. We rubbed each other's backs to keep the circulation going. Felon being older than Throne. Felon was 58, Throne was 28. Felon was the wise old timer, and he would go and keep Throne, on his mark. Help them keep him grounded, help keep him from going crazy. So
Yeah.
there was that symbiotic relationship there. But it was an international story of human survival, and that story in itself was wonderful. I mean, they didn't have to pepper it with stories of humanoid creatures and golden cities and the blue fireflies and Pope John the 23rd. They didn't have to do that, but the vision of Pope John the 23rd was front and center in their narrative. They saw him and they claimed that he saved their lives. So, again, whether you believe that or not, I mean, that's what they said and that's what they took to the grave.
Yeah, that's I'm glad that you wrote about it and getting it out there in the paranormal world because, like I said, it's a story that people should know about in the paranormal world and should be a bigger story. One of the stories in your book that you cover that I know a lot of people know, especially if you're into UFOs, is the Kecksburg incident.
Oh yeah, right, yeah.
And that's a really interesting UFO story about a UFO crashing in Pennsylvania, and it was a acorn shape that the government, of course, tried to cover it up and all this. But that's an interesting story as well.
Yeah, I have 2 chapters on UFOs in my book, and one's the Kecksburg one, and one is the UFO Enigma. But last year, my wife and I went out to Western Pennsylvania. So we went to the Kecksburg UFO Festival, and I had known Stan Gordon. He's a local Bigfoot and UFO guy. He keeps all this documentation. As a matter of fact, whenever the state police get any kind of reports of Bigfoot and UFOs, they tell people to call Stan Gordon because Stan keeps all these records. But anyway, we had a chance to meet him. And like I said, I had known him for decades, but had a chance to finally meet him. And then we went up to Evans City, where they shot Night of the Living Dead. And the mayor, Dean Zinkhan, gave us a guided tour. So anyway, this was finishing up my book, Coleridge and Hoodoo. So we went to Western Pennsylvania. But at Kecksburg, there were a ton of people there. But in December, I believe it was, of 1965, something crashed outside of Kecksburg, just like Roswell. The military came in. They chased people away. They took something out on these army trucks with tarps in the dead of night, and then they told people to shut up. You didn't see anything. Now, here's the thing. Stan Gordon and a whole bunch of other people used the Freedom of Information Act to try to get information about the Kecksburg UFO crash. And what they got was either redacted, and that is important stuff was scrubbed out, was blackened out, or the other papers they just disappeared. They couldn't find them. So we weren't able, none of the researchers were able to really get to the bottom of what happened in Kecksburg in 65. Some people thought it was a Soviet satellite that was guided and maneuverable that crashed there. Other people think that it was an acorn-shaped UFO, a saucer. But again, to this day, we're not exactly sure what it is because, we have that government cover-up. Again, the question would be, why would the government not tell us what that was in 1965? I mean, the technology from 65 has to be light years, behind what we have today,
right.
With all these computerized chips and everything else. And the same thing with Roswell and Project Mogul and everything else. Again, the government has not been forthcoming in sharing with us information that they have. So again, many people are very skeptical of the government, of what they're saying. And, and I mentioned this in Coleridge and Hoodoo in a number of places, but, the government has not been a willing or an equal partner. And again, we don't know what's happening with the UFOs. We know that the government was all over the place with, they put together Project Sign, around I believe it was 47, somewhere around there, Project Sign, to figure out what these UFOs were, to try to explain it. They couldn't, and they were going back and forth. There were some government entities that wanted full disclosure. There were other ones that wanted them just to censor everything. Then we had Project Grunge, which was took a real hard line approach at saucers, like giving the impression that they weren't anything. It was just hysteria. And then Project Blue Book, where again they tried to take a look at it, and they ended up by concluding that it was a waste of money to do Project Blue Book. But one thing the government is good at doing, as Project Blue Book was closing down, they would have another project under another name that was doing the same thing,
Right.
looking at UFOs. And again, any people like you and I trying to track this or keep on top of it would have a hard time, because here's a new government entity with another name that nobody knows anything about. So it's getting funded, but nobody knows that it's actually looking for UFOs. So the big thing in ufology, and I talk about this in Co-Region Hoodoo, was 2020. The Pentagon admitted that there were things out there. Well, they did several things. One, they changed the name from UFOs to UAPs. So it went from unidentified flying objects to unidentified aerial phenomenon, now changed once again to unidentified anonymous phenomenon, UAPs. Government, so they changed the name, and then the government said that out of all the things that we're seeing, 3% of them we can identify. So take your pick. They're either ours, they either belong to Russia, China, or Iran, or they're extraterrestrial. But what we do know is that they're faster and more maneuverable than anything we have or any stealth technology that we believe the other side has. So I don't know. They seem to be manned. They seem to be maneuverable. They do these really rapid turns that with the G-force, if anybody was in there, they would die because it was just too tremendous of a turn. So we don't know, but 3% of these are out there. The government is encouraging pilots and other people to come forward and let us know what they're seeing. So I don't know if they're being hypocritical or what, but at least it seems that the landscape for ufology has changed since 2020. So we'll see what happens. But
yeah, and one thing I think is interesting looking back at some of these older cases like Kecksburg from the 60s is that the shape, that acorn shape, is similar to what we're seeing in these UAP videos that they're putting out.
Yeah.
That they can explain. It's a very similar shape. And so to go back so to me, that gives more validity to the Kecksburg incident, the people, reporting on that, because it's the same stuff that our government's saying, we don't know what it is. And they're the same similar shapes and things.
Yeah. And they're saying the same thing all over the world. So it's not just us, but we don't know what it is. I mean, I was talking to a podcast a while back, and he was saying, boy, I hope that in our lifetime we could go and figure this out and see solve the mystery. Anyway, Gene Steinberg on Paracast. I don't know, but a lot of people are looking and watching, taking notes. I'm hoping that that we're going to be able to discover something. But I view all this, Eric, as a scientist. I consider myself an academic. And I try to, in Co-Region Hoodoo, I take the paranormal and the spiritual and bring it a little bit closer to the scientific. So all I'm doing is trying to find some reasons, trying to find some scientific rationale for what we're seeing. The paranormal is one thing that's been covered, but with the spiritual, I talk about Pope John the 23rd and his miracle. I talk about Saint Teresa of Avila, the 14th century Spanish mystic, that what a hoot. I mean, she believed that through prayer and meditation, people could reach states of ecstasy and rapture and actually have this flight of the soul. And that is an out-of-body experience. Felon Enthroned, the Shepton miners, had numerous out-of-body experiences brought on by their prayer and meditation down in the pit. And they believed that they were able to have an out-of-body experience where they went up through the mine and could look down and see the rescue team, the Salvation Army and the National Guard and all the rest. So I believe this was an example of St. Teresa of Avila's flight of the soul. So that's in there. Another thing, too, that Co-Region Hoodoo is Pennsylvania-centric, but a lot of this is, I had a personal involvement with. And I talk about Ed and Lorraine Warren, the Roman Catholic demonologists. They were in Jim Thorpe, Pennsylvania, in 1988. And Ed and Lorraine Warren were embarking on a 15-city tour for the book The Haunted, and they were part of the Schmurl haunting in West Pittston, Pennsylvania. There was a movie made, there was a book, and so I went there to Jim Thorpe and I interviewed them, I hung out with them, and became friends with them. And I would call Ed and Lorraine had a pet rooster, and they're up in Connecticut, so I would call her, and you could hear the pet rooster in the background. But when I was doing the research on the Schmurl haunting, they were a really big help, and they believed in the existence of evil, that evil exists, that the devil exists, that the devil wants us to believe that he or she is only a myth. But these theologians and priests and ministers that I've spoken with, all believe that that evil does exist. And I when I do my seminars, I caution people about things like seances, Ouija boards, tarot cards, all of that. I just claim for some people this could be a gateway to the unknown, a gateway to evil. And one thing of concern is that there's so many people that are doing these haunted house investigations. They have their devices and they go into these haunted houses looking for demonic spirits. And I'm thinking, some of these folks may just find something that they may not be able to control. So, I'm just saying, just be cautious with that, because there are forces there, and don't kid yourself. The paranormal is more than just literature. I think it's it's something of substance.
Yeah, I've been an investigator mainly for ghosts and researcher since I was a teenager, so about 25 years or more now. I always tell people, when you start looking at the paranormal, it starts looking back at you.
Exactly.
And the deeper you get in, the more that you attract yourself. And one of the things I found as well as going into it is it's all about your intention.
Uh-huh.
And so, if you go in intending looking for something evil, I think they're going to play to that.
Mm-hmm.
If you go in being very respectful when you go on an investigation at a place, if you go in respectful and things, there's still nasty things out there that I've come across. I've never come across anything that I would call demonic.
Yeah.
I always say if you're an asshole in life, you're probably going to be an asshole in death.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
So at a couple of jails that I've investigated, I've come across some nasty spirits, but they were nasty in life.
Yeah.
But I'm on the fence about
karma. It's karma.
Yeah.
It comes back on you. In my book, I interviewed Dr. Santee. He was the high priest for a coven, the Coven of the Kata, and he lived right up the road from me. Dr. Santee was called one of the foremost abstract thinkers of the 20th century. Graduated from Harvard at age 14. His coven was, sanctioned or licensed, whatever the terminology was, by Sybil Leek, the world's most famous witch. So anyway, Santee was right down the road from me, but he told me that you could either use the right pathway or the left pathway. And with the right pathway, that's helping and healing. The left pathway is for cursing and putting a hoax, a hex on somebody. So you have your options there. But he said that if you choose the left pathway, it will come back on you tenfold. So you need to choose wisely. But he was an incredible guy. I was his patient. I was his friend. I interviewed him numerous times. And Dr. Frederick Santee, he's in my book, the Co-Region Hoodoo. And for folks that aren't familiar with the Wicca religion, the Wicca craft, and all that, get the book and read that chapter. And I've had numerous practitioners of Wicca reach out to me and thank me for writing that chapter, claiming that it was very respectful, that I was very respectful of Santee. So that's one of the best feedbacks that you can receive. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, I'm kind of on the fence when it comes to the demonic and things like that. Like I said, I think there are nasty spirits out there and that did nasty things in life. But I think it also is with the paranormal, and I respect anybody who's religious, and I think it takes all of us in the paranormal to try to figure this out. But I think it depends on what lens you're looking at it through. if you're looking at it through more of a religious lens, then it through a Catholic or Christian lens, then it may be a demon, to where, and there, I've heard there are things out there that were never living, whether you want to call them demons or angels or anything like that. So yeah, it's just the whole paranormal is just fascinating. The fact that we don't know anything. Every time I think I've learned something, I have 1,000 more questions.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and it's nice to have these conversations because we learn a little bit more. We each one teach one. So
Yeah,
that's the
yeah,
important thing. But again, just what you just said. I mean, again, I would just caution people to be aware that there may be dark forces out there, no matter
right.
what you want to call them. Dark forces
Yeah,
that
yeah,
may be harmful. So just be aware of that and make sure that that you're in a safe place and mentally, especially mentally and psychologically, and even spiritually. That's my
yeah,
my 2 cents, my advice.
yeah, and also don't go mess around with things you don't understand.
Exactly. Yeah.
If you don't know what you're doing, yeah, don't be breaking out tarot cards. And I've seen plenty of hauntings of private residences where people have messed around with things they didn't understand, and actually drawn things in when their house wasn't haunted to begin with and never had anything paranormal, but they get to messing around in the arcane and some of the things, and yeah, they bring things in.
Yeah. Yeah. And there may be a parallel too with, like, say, mental health and psychology and the occult. And I was just thinking about that because we say in psychology, if you open up that door, that door where there's all these repressed memories, like some toxic stuff. If you open up that door, then you also have to find a way to close it. In therapy.
Right,
The same thing with the paranormal. If you open up that door, that leads to something really nasty and foreboding, something evil, you got to find a way to close that too. So, however you do that, I mean, again, I don't know, but I think it works both ways. So,
yeah, yeah,
and again, we're all sort of finding this out together. I mean, the exploration of the paranormal is just like, it just is tremendous. I mean, I can't tell you with Coleridge and Hoodoo how with the podcast and everything. I think after the COVID, they just exploded, and I mean, it's just a wonderful, energized world of podcasts like yours that are just like communicating to the world and opening up ideas and educating people. It's just a wonderful thing, and I think that's why Coleridge and Hoodoo is trending like it is. I just think that a lot of people are talking about it and saying it, and so it's an exciting time for me. I mean, it's a very exciting time for me as a researcher and as an author.
yeah. And I would tell my audience, everybody go out and grab a copy. It's available on Amazon, and you can go out and grab a copy right now. It's a great read. It was very entertaining at the same time, and like we were talking about earlier, it's not just one of those where here's the story and the facts. It's weaving all that together and understanding the psychology and the pop culture, and yeah, it just kind of takes you on a journey, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, and for any of your listeners that are going to get a copy, if you do get a copy of Coleridge and Hoodoo, Paranormal Tales from Inside the Pit, also please be so kind as to offer a review on Amazon.
Yeah,
Good, bad, or indifferent, it doesn't matter, but it just helps us authors when we get a review. And
yeah,
I'm not sure how that works with Amazon, but all we know is that when we get a review, it seems to help. So,
yeah.
please.
So Coleridge and Hoodoo just came out a few months ago.
Yep.
So what do you have? What do you have coming up? You got any appearances coming up where people can come out and see your presentation and see you and talk to you?
Yeah, I've been invited to the Bigfoot Expo in Elysburg, Pennsylvania. That's going to be August the 12th. I've been invited to the Bigfoot and Supernatural Expo in Johnstown, Pennsylvania on September the 30th. And that'll be in Western Pennsylvania, which is close to Chestnut Ridge. That's the weird area in Pennsylvania where they see the most Bigfoot and UFO sightings. So Chestnut Ridge. But I'm going to be out that way. And then also we're trying to put together another conference either in the Villages in Florida or maybe in northern Arkansas around Yatesville, where Richard Sharp Shaver is buried. So I'm dealing with some people that are putting together a documentary on the life and times of Richard Sharp Shaver. And Richard is in my book. And one thing that's interesting is that both Richard Sharpshaver and me, Maxim W. Furek, were both born in Berwick, Pennsylvania. And what I've been doing, I've been sort of educating the people of Berwick about Richard because nobody knows about him. He was pretty popular in the 40s, and he claimed that he was captured by these evil Diros and kept, prisoner in these subterranean caves and everything. And, so they talk about the Shaver mystery that was in Amazing Stories, and it just won't go away. But there's some folks that are putting together a documentary on Richard Sharpshaver, and I've been invited to participate in that. So I'm excited about that because, here's a Berwick guy that needs, not me, but Richard Sharpshaver that needs some more attention. So this is going to be fun. But, with me, I can't tell you, Eric, how the doors are opening. I mean, the paranormal doors. I mean, people saying, hey, listen, would you like to participate in this or, whatever. So, again, the paranormal family is warm and supportive, and I can't say enough about it. So, it's just a wonderful thing that you do. And, I'm just so glad that, you continue to educate people about, maybe the unknown.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love the podcast platform because, it's uncensored. I can do whatever I want, have whoever I want on the show. And yeah, it's just great to talk about different aspects of our world that, may not get out there otherwise. And it's just a fun thing to do. I've enjoyed doing it. I'll continue to do it. And I'm fortunate to do it for a living now. So
yeah, that's awesome. And the other thing too, with talk about government censorship, we're not dealing with that, but I am allowed as a paranormal researcher to say that I believe there have been government cover-ups about Roswell and about Kecksburg and about everything else. So we believe that there's cover-ups, and and this isn't being censored. I could say it, and so can you, but we believe that some of that is true. So there's cover-ups going up for whatever going on for whatever reason. We don't know, but
yeah. You going to be working on any other books?
Yeah, I am, and I'm excited. This summer I've just immersed myself in ufology. I'm reading every single science flying saucer book I can get my hands on, but I have a book coming out called The Flying Saucer Esoteric, and that's Esoteric. It's called The Flying Saucer Esoteric, a comprehensive listing of history's most fantastic UFO events. So it's not a encyclopedia, but it's a sort of like a time machine going through this wonderful world of ufology. And I just can't tell you the research I'm doing, but again, looking at the contactees, abductees, the scientists, the hoaxers, the popular culture, the exploration of outer space. Just amazing stuff that just, I love doing it. I'm so totally immersed in it. And this is going to be a big one. The Flying Saucer Esoteric. You're going to hear about this. And I think every ufologist is going to have this book on his or her bookshelf. So, it's going to be huge. And it's a different lens, a different way of looking at things. And again, I'm using the term flying saucer and UFOs. I'm not using UAPs. I'm using flying saucer because I love that term. And, it means something to a lot of us. So, but hopefully that's going to be coming out hopefully by Beyond the Fray and hopefully in 2023. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I'll look forward to reading that and hopefully have you back on the show to talk all about UFOs.
Oh, absolutely. And I think this will be revealing. This is going to be revealing just to see this in its totality. So again, it's going to be the Flying Saucer Esoteric. And I'm excited about it. I think this is going to be huge. So.
All right. Everybody, I will put the links to all of Maxim Furek's stuff for the books and his social media and all that in the show notes as usual. So y'all can go check it out and go grab a copy of the book. Max, thank you so much for coming on today and chatting with us. I really, really enjoyed the conversation.
Yeah, thanks, Eric. I appreciate it. I appreciate the opportunity to tell your listeners about Coleridge and Hoodoo. And like we said, I hope that they find it of interest and pick up a copy. So that'd be great.
It was my pleasure having you today.
Okay, thank you. You have a good day.
You too. All right, everybody, stay safe out there. We'll see you next time. Join us next time for a new episode of The Unseen Paranormal. Until then, head over to the Unseen Paranormal Lounge on Facebook for all the latest updates and discussions about the show. And please rate, review, share, and subscribe to help more people discover the show. And as always, thank you for listening.
You have come to the end of the line.